Pope Francis appointed Manila Archbishop Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle as the new prefect of the congregation.
Edward, what can we expect from Cardinal Tagle in this new Vatican position?
Pope Francis has stunned the world by officially stepping down, marking the end of an era for the Catholic Church. But what's even more shocking is the man taking his place, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. Hailed as a compassionate reformer yet shadowed by controversy, Tagle's rise to the papacy is anything but straightforward. Known for his close ties to Francis, his progressive ideals, and his stance on China, Tagle now faces a church divided by tradition and change. So why did Pope Francis place such high trust in Tagle? And can he truly unite a fractured church? A historic papal transition. Over the last decade, Pope Francis has been a beacon of change, shaking up centuries-old traditions and turning the spotlight on mercy, inclusion, and justice. But now those close to him are saying something surprising. He feels his mission is complete. Yes, complete. The time, he believes, has come for someone new to lead the church into the future. Behind closed doors, in quiet conversations with his closest advisors, Pope Francis has reportedly found a sense of peace with this decision. And let's not sugarcoat it. His papacy hasn't exactly been smooth sailing. From tackling long-standing issues within the church to navigating global crises, the challenges have been immense. But even with the weight of it all, his faith in the church's ability to evolve, to meet the needs of its followers in an ever-changing world, has never wavered. That's a legacy worth celebrating. Now, this is where things take a truly intriguing turn. Word on the Vatican street is that Pope Francis may have already chosen his preferred successor. Technically, the election of a new pope happens through a conclave of cardinals, a sacred and secretive process. But let's be honest, a departing pope's influence? That's no small thing. As for who this potential new leader might be, well, that's still under wraps. But insiders hint at someone who shares Francis's vision, a church that's more inclusive, more socially conscious, and more in tune with the pulse of the modern world. Think about it. A leader who doesn't just carry the torch but reignites it, blazing a path into a future that feels more connected and compassionate than ever before. Well, the timing here couldn't be more fascinating. Here's why. This monumental choice comes during the Jubilee of Hope, a global celebration Francis launched on Christmas Eve, 2024. A jubilee meant to inspire renewal, reflection, and, of course, hope for a world navigating enormous challenges. It's a moment where millions are being invited to dream of a brighter future. And now, unexpectedly, it may also serve as the closing chapter of Pope Francis's transformative papacy. But what makes this moment so remarkable is not just the timing, it's the man himself. Those close to Pope Francis describe him as being at complete peace with his legacy. Here is a leader who has boldly opened dialogues on topics once deemed untouchable within the church, championed the fight against climate change, and driven efforts to reform the Vatican's financial practices. In doing so, he has not only led but redefined leadership. These are bold moves that will ripple through history. And yet, there lies the catch. Even as he steps aside, Pope Francis knows there's still so much work left to be done. Yes, the transition of papal leadership is anything but simple. It's a process steeped in tradition, with intricate steps that must be followed. If the rumors hold true, Pope Francis may be following in the footsteps of Pope Benedict XVI, opting for abdication over serving until death. If so, this would mark only the second papal resignation in modern history. Let that sink in for a moment. Centuries of precedent shifted in just one decade. Within Vatican City, the whispers of this potential change are growing louder. There's a palpable sense of both anticipation and uncertainty in the air. After all, this isn't merely about a change in leadership. It's about the Church's future. How will this transition shape its stance on some of the most pressing issues of our time? From the role of women in the inclusion of LGBTQ Catholics to the ongoing urgent need to address clerical abuse. These are pivotal crossroads, and whoever steps into Francis's shoes will not only have to carry forward his vision, but also define their own path in a rapidly changing world. But when we talk about Pope Francis, we're not just talking about a leader of the Catholic Church, we're talking about a global icon. His emphasis on social justice, environmental stewardship, and interfaith dialogue has made him a transformative figure, not just for the church, but for the entire world. And now, as the rumors grow louder about his potential departure, one thing is certain: the ripple effects will be felt far and wide in political arenas, social movements, and spiritual communities across the globe. Meanwhile, within the Vatican, a quiet buzz fills the air. Preparations are reportedly underway for what could be one of the most historic announcements in recent memory. The big questions: how will Pope Francis communicate his decision to the world's 1.3 billion Catholics? And what will this farewell moment look like? Whoever follows in his footsteps will face an immense challenge. The next leader will inherit a church poised at a critical crossroads, navigating the same delicate balance that defined Pope Francis's time: the tension between honoring tradition and embracing progress. But as the church stands at this pivotal juncture, it seems the next pope's selection may already be taking shape within the sacred traditions of the conclave, the pope's successor. The choice of the next pope lies with the College of Cardinals, a group of elite leaders who will gather in the Sistine Chapel for a conclave once Pope Francis officially steps down. The process is deeply rooted in tradition and shrouded in mystery. But make no mistake, the influence of Pope Francis will linger in that room. Every decision he made during his tenure, every cardinal he elevated, points to the kind of leader he hopes will carry his vision forward. And among the whispered names, one stands out with hope and promise: Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. Born in the Philippines, Cardinal Tagle is more than just a charismatic leader. He's a symbol of everything Pope Francis has stood for. Known for his deep compassion and theological brilliance, Tagle has spent years advocating for the poor and the marginalized, echoing the heart of Francis's message. You see, he's more than a leader. He's a bridge builder, a unifier, and, perhaps most importantly, a voice for those who need it most. What truly sets Cardinal Tagle apart, however, is not just his vision, it's his ability to transform that vision into tangible action, touching lives across the globe in ways that are both practical and profoundly inspiring. Take, for example, his work in sub-Saharan Africa. In a region where many Catholics face unimaginable economic hardships, Tagle didn't just offer words of encouragement, he offered solutions. Under his leadership, the Vatican partnered with local communities to fund schools and vocational training programs. His focus: creating sustainable opportunities to lift families out of poverty while strengthening their faith. Cardinal Tagle's initiatives gave people the tools to change their lives, while reminding them of the Church's deep commitment to their spiritual and material well-being. And Africa is just one piece of the puzzle. Half a world away, in Myanmar, a country torn apart by political and ethnic conflict, Tagle stepped in with a bold vision for peace. Here, he championed reconciliation, knowing that healing wasn't just about mending political divides, it was about bridging faiths. By bringing Catholic and Buddhist leaders together, Tagle created a platform for dialogue, fostering understanding and unity in a region desperate for hope. Tagle's belief in the power of the Church as a catalyst for peace and healing became a beacon of light for communities struggling to move beyond their differences. But the real genius of Cardinal Tagle's leadership lies in his commitment to enculturation. Now, what does that mean? Simply put, it's the idea that the Church doesn't just preach to communities. It listens to them, adapts to them, and celebrates their unique cultures. Like in Africa and Asia, Tagle has championed the integration of indigenous music, art, and language into Catholic liturgical practices. And here's the beauty of it: it's not just a nod to diversity, it's a celebration of it. For Tagle, the Church doesn't merely exist within different cultures, it belongs to them. It becomes part of their story, their struggles, and their triumphs. This approach empowers local communities to express their faith in ways that feel authentic and meaningful, forging a connection that transcends tradition and resonates deeply. Now, this isn't where his influence ends. Cardinal Tagle is also a global force for compassion and action, especially when it comes to some of the world's most vulnerable populations. As president of Caritas Internationalis, Tagle spearheaded the Share the Journey campaign, a global initiative that brought awareness to the plight of migrants and refugees. But here's the thing: Tagle didn't just talk about the dignity of displaced people from a distance. He showed up. In the refugee camps of Lebanon and Jordan, Tagle met people face to face, hearing their struggles, their fears, and their hopes. His empathy wasn't just heartfelt, it was active. By using his platform to amplify their voices, Tagle reminded the world that these are not just statistics. These are human beings with stories that demand to be heard. This same sense of urgency and compassion drives his approach to broader social justice issues. Climate change, poverty, migration, these aren't just abstract problems to him. They're systemic challenges that the Church must tackle boldly and tangibly. Through his work, Tagle has encouraged the Vatican to partner with secular organizations and take real action. His vision, a church that doesn't just preach about justice, but actively works to create it, standing side by side with the global community. So what makes Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle such a compelling figure in the global church? It's not just his charisma or his compassion, it's his connection to Pope Francis. Over the years, Francis and Tagle have shared more than just a vision for a compassionate and inclusive church. Their relationship has been built on trust, collaboration, and a shared mission to bring Catholic teachings to the world in a way that truly resonates. In 2019, Pope Francis made a bold move, appointing Tagle as head of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, a position that puts him at the very heart of the Church's mission work. From this role, Tagle oversees efforts to spread Catholic teachings across the globe, especially in regions where the Church is growing most rapidly. But that's not all. As the leader of Caritas Internationalis, the Church's humanitarian arm, Tagle has further demonstrated his alignment with Francis's vision of service, compassion, and inclusion. This close collaboration between Francis and Tagle has led many to see Tagle as the natural successor to the papacy. And it's not just because of his resume, it's because of what he represents. Like Francis, Tagle exudes humility, warmth, and an ability to connect with ordinary people. Whether he's addressing complex theological questions or simply sharing a meal with refugees, Tagle reflects the approachable, grounded demeanor that has endeared Francis to millions around the world. But Tagle's rise hasn't been accidental. It's the result of a clear alignment with the values Francis has championed in throughout his papacy, values like compassion, inclusion, and a steadfast commitment to addressing global challenges such as poverty, migration, and climate change. For a time, Tagle's path to the papacy seemed almost inevitable. His growing influence and Francis's trust in him positioned him as the leading contender in the eyes of many. Observers praised not only his theological brilliance, but also his remarkable ability to stay deeply connected to ordinary people, a quality increasingly viewed as essential for modern church leadership. But as the spotlight shifts to Cardinal Tagle, the journey ahead carries its challenges. Beneath the admiration lies a web of issues that could redefine his legacy and test whether he's truly prepared to guide the church through its most complex era. Is Tagle ready to lead the church? Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle may be a frontrunner in the race to become the next pope, but his path to the papacy is far from guaranteed. While his compassionate leadership and global appeal have earned him widespread admiration, his close association with Pope Francis may present its own set of challenges. To succeed, Tagle will need to show the world that he is more than an Asian Francis and carve out a unique identity in the eyes of the College of Cardinals. However, three critical factors could undermine his chances: competition from other candidates, criticism of his domestic record, and his reluctance to speak out more openly in China. First, Tagle faces stiff competition from other candidates, particularly Singaporean Cardinal William Goh. Like Tagle, Goh brings the advantage of being both Anglophone and from Asia, qualities that align with the Church's growing focus on regions outside of Europe. However, Goh is also seen as someone who can bridge gaps with the conservative factions within the Church, a quality that Tagle, viewed as firmly within the progressive camp, may struggle to replicate. Secondly, Tagle's progressive reputation is both his greatest asset and a potential liability. He has consistently championed the importance of hospitality within the Church, challenging harsh rhetoric and advocating for inclusivity, particularly towards LGBTQ Catholics. At the recent Lambeth Conference, Tagle underscored the dangers of allowing ethnic and cultural issues to undermine the Church's mission, while also criticizing populist tendencies that distort the meaning of unity. These remarks have deeply resonated with progressive Catholics, but risk alienating more traditional members of the hierarchy. Finally, Tagle's perceived hesitancy to take a stronger stance on issues related to China has drawn criticism. As the church navigates a delicate relationship with Beijing, some believe Tagle's relative silence on this contentious issue could be a liability, especially when other candidates may be more willing to address these complexities head-on. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle's path to the papacy is further complicated by his striking parallels to Pope Francis's rhetoric, paired with mounting criticism of his domestic and international record. While these factors underscore his alignment with the current Pope's vision, they also raise important questions about his leadership style and independence, qualities that could prove decisive in the conclave's ultimate decision. Tagle's rhetoric often echoes Pope Francis's, particularly on migration and populism. For instance, Pope Francis, speaking on his return from Kazakhstan, stressed the importance of migration as a way to enrich the intellectual and cultural fabric of the West. He called for policies that integrate migrants, advocating that they should be welcomed. Similarly, Tagle has cautioned against populist attitudes that jeopardize the spiritual unity of the Church and highlighted the significance of hospitality and inclusivity. While these shared ideals resonate with progressives, they also tether Tagle closely to Francis's legacy, possibly alienating factions within the Church that are looking for a leader with a distinct and independent voice. Compounding this challenge is criticism of Tagle's domestic record as Archbishop of Manila, which further clouds his candidacy. The Manila Standard accused him of entangling the Church in partisan politics, particularly through his vocal criticism of former President Rodrigo Duterte. Critics argue that Tagle's involvement crossed the line, violating the constitutional separation of church and state. According to Luis Birogo, Tagle permitted homilies that featured divisive political rhetoric aimed at discrediting Duterte's administration and rallying opposition among Catholics. These actions have raised concerns about his ability to maintain neutrality and focus on spiritual rather than political leadership, qualities many see as critical for the next pope. Additionally, Tagle has faced scrutiny for allegedly failing to hold clerics accountable for misconduct during his tenure. This perceived leniency has left some questioning his capacity to enforce discipline within the Church. But perhaps the most challenging test of Tagle's leadership lies beyond internal church matters. It's his calculated stance on China. Tagle's silence on China. On the global stage, Tagle's position on China remains a point of contention. As Pope Francis continues to pursue a controversial agreement with the Chinese Communist Party, Tagle has largely echoed the Vatican's cautious approach, avoiding open criticism of Beijing. While this aligns him with Francis's policies, it risks associating him with the growing criticism of the Vatican's dealings with the CCP, particularly from those who feel the Church is compromising its values. Tagle's silence on this issue is particularly striking given his prominent roles within the Vatican. As prefect for the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, and now pro-prefect of its successor, the Dicastery for Evangelization, he holds significant authority on matters of global church outreach. Yet his reticence to address the controversial Vatican-China deal has not gone unnoticed, especially considering his background and the Philippines' ongoing territorial disputes with China. This perceived quietude raises questions about his willingness to confront politically sensitive issues, a quality some may view as a liability in the context of the papacy. The Dicastery for Evangelization, which Tagle led from 2019 to 2022, played a pivotal role during the negotiation period of the Vatican-China agreement. While Tagle wasn't directly involved in crafting the deal, the Dicastery bore some responsibility for overseeing the well-being of Chinese Christians throughout this time. His proximity to the discussions, coupled with his partial Chinese heritage, adds another layer of complexity to his silence on the issue. For many observers, this restraint has amplified concerns about whether he would effectively address similarly sensitive geopolitical matters as Pope. Tagle's silence comes at a pivotal moment. The trial of Cardinal Joseph Zen, a vocal critic of the Vatican-China agreement, was set to begin on September 19th, though later postponed. Meanwhile, Pope Francis, who has adopted a conciliatory tone toward China, reportedly sought a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping during his visit to Kazakhstan, a request that was declined. Francis has framed his approach as the path of dialogue, while also appearing to downplay Zen's criticism, stating that the elderly cardinal says what he feels, but acknowledging limitations. Tagle's alignment with this cautious Vatican strategy contrasted with his lack of public criticism, could be seen as a weakness. By not distancing himself from the controversial agreement, particularly at a time when figures like German Cardinal Gerhard Müller have openly expressed dismay at the Vatican's perceived silence in Zen's unfair trial, Tagle risked being seen as complicit in a policy that some view as compromising the Church's moral authority. For Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, the greatest challenge may lie in overcoming perceptions of being too closely tied to Pope Francis's legacy. While his popularity, charisma, and extensive experience have positioned him as a leading contender for the papacy, his critics argue that he struggles to bridge divides within the Church as effectively as some of his peers, particularly Singaporean Cardinal William Goh, who shares many of Tagle's advantages while being seen as more adept at appealing to conservative factions. The criticisms leveled against Tagle, particularly concerning his domestic record in the Philippines, are largely in the past and unlikely to weigh heavily on the College of Cardinals. These issues, while debated, may ultimately have minimal impact on his candidacy. However, his reluctance to speak openly about the Vatican-China deal presents a more pressing concern, especially as the Church continues to face scrutiny over its approach to relations with Beijing. This silence, along with his perceived inability to reach across ideological aisles, presents both a challenge and an opportunity for Tagle. By addressing these areas, he could demonstrate that he is not simply an Asian Francis, but a leader with a distinctive vision and the capacity to unify a diverse Church in a time of global challenges. If Tagle can take bold steps to reconcile these criticisms, engaging with critics, articulating a clear stance on contentious issues like China, and showing an ability to navigate the Church's internal divides, he could reinvigorate his candidacy and solidify his place as a serious contender for the papacy. The opportunity to rise above these challenges remains firmly in his hands. The Catholic Church stands at a crossroads. With Pope Francis stepping down and Cardinal Luis Tagle stepping up, the future has never felt more uncertain or more promising. What do you think about this historic shift? Will Tagle live up to the challenges ahead, or does his past raise too many questions? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates on this monumental moment in Church history. The story is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what happens next.